National Unity, Mr. Ganesh Michael, Member of Parliament for the Partnership for National Unity, Ms. Nima Flubes, Member of Parliament, a Partnership for National Unity, and Dr. Terence Campbell, Member of Parliament for Partnership for National Unity. Today's press statement will be read by the leader.
The 2026 budget is a recipe for increased poverty and does not put people first. Having campaigned in the 2025 elections under the theme Putting People First and pursuing a people-centered development strategy, we found it interesting that the PPP government chose to use our theme for the 2026 budget rather than their campaign theme. They are probably ashamed since they know that they are not moving forward together for a better Guyana as their theme suggests. While we welcome the acknowledgement that we were correct in deciding to put people first, we are deeply concerned that the government used the said theme. But when you scrutinize the budget, they continue to put themselves, families, friends, and favorites first. Were the government serious about putting people first, the budget would have had adequate provisions to deal with the high cost of living, poverty, a livable income, and a robust anti-corruption program. Budget 2026 fails to deal with these critical issues that will put people first. This budget gives 50.04% infrastructure development. This is the same old focus of the PPP government. While we recognize the need for the development of infrastructure, it cannot be at the expense of the development of the people of Guyana. It is for this reason that the government's claim that it is focusing on human development is spurious. This focus on infrastructure is a clear sign that the aim is to put wealth in the hands of the PPP elite, family, friends, and favorites. It is generally recognized that 30% or more of the monies allocated for infrastructure development ends up in corruption and wastage. This is supported by evidence that would have emerged from a comparative analysis of highway development in Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana. The Ogle to Eccles Bypass Road, which began in 2020 when prices would have been lower, in comparison to the Churchill Roosevelt Highway extension to Manzanilla in Trinidad and Tobago in 2025, cost 43% per kilometer more than the road in Trinidad and Tobago. In the case of Guyana, the cost per kilometer of road is US $17,153,846.15. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, the road cost per kilometer is US $11,940,298.60. This means that Guyana pays US $5,213,547.55 per kilometer more than in Trinidad and Tobago. This is unmistakable evidence of incompetence, corruption, and wastage. Government cannot claim to be putting people first and allow such high levels of wastage and corruption when spending taxpayers' money. Interestingly, while the president said he will address the issue of corruption, there are no measures in this budget that look to address these critical questions of incompetence, wastage, and widespread corruption. In the APNU's approach of putting people first, we said clearly, give a livable income. Unfortunately, the government offers a 9% increase to public servants. This is inadequate and puts workers last. We call on the government to give public servants a minimum of 25% wages and salary increase. Why are we as a country earning large sums from oil but giving pittance to the poor and working people? Because we Care Crash grant increased by only $10,000 against the extremely high cost of living that public servants and low-wage private sector employees face. In contrast, APNU promised 120,000 cash grant for each child of school age. This is affordable, and if implemented, it will improve the quality of life of Guyanese poor and vulnerable groups and put people first. The alleged pension was increased by $5,000 to only $46,000 per month, even though President Ali himself promised Guyanese pensioners $60,000 per month. The government should honor the President's promise to the people of Guyana, even though it is less than the 100,000 APNU promise in its manifesto. People on public assistance are easily categorized as vulnerable people. How we treat the most vulnerable among us is a measure of our compassion. Public assistance increased by an unacceptable $3,000 per month to $25,000. APNU promised $44,000 per month. With a high cost of living, this is an extremely small increase. This extremely small increase is a pittance and a clear indication that the PPP is sadly out of touch with the economic realities on the ground, or they just don't care about the people and would not put the people first. Pathway workers will receive $50,000 monthly, only $10,000 more per month, and no hope for a living wage for the abuse they suffer at the hands of PPPC. In our manifesto, APNU promised the same $10,000 increase, but we added other meaningful benefits of skills training and full-time jobs to these pathway workers. APNU is always keen to offer dignity to our citizens, not domination and control. The undignified election gimmick of a 200,000 cash transfer was drastically cut to only 10,000 by the PPPC. In our manifesto, APNU offered 100,000 annually. The PPPC clearly is disrespectful to the Guyanese people and is not willing to put the people first. And even the increase of the income tax threshold by 10,000 is a joke that many Guyanese cannot afford to laugh at. It pains Guyanese. The PPPC budget measures above total approximately $78 billion. When compared to the total budget of $1.558 trillion, they are a stingy 5%. If we compare all the other so-called fiscal empowerment programs, which the PPP says total $100 billion, they are only 6.4% of the $1.558 trillion budget. Less than 7 cents of every budget dollar go to the people. Clearly, this is not putting people first. The question remains, who are the people that they are putting first? It reeks of families, friends, and favorites. This approach ensures continuing poverty. As it relates to poverty and improving living conditions, there's a paltry $100 million hidden in the budget under the Ministry of Finance, I quote, to improve living conditions to the most vulnerable groups through community development programs and projects. Please note, this is for all 10 administrative regions. Interestingly, the men on mission will get 900,000 or 900 million, which is 9 times the amount allocated to the vulnerable in Guyana. This cannot improve the lives of the vulnerable, much less contribute to poverty reduction. It is ridiculous, unconscionable, and unacceptable in Guyana, where more than 50% of the population live in poverty. Poverty reduction should have been one of the critical pillars of the budget if the government was serious about putting people first. In the absence of poverty reduction measures, the 2026 budget fails to deal with the critical issue of poverty reduction and ultimately poverty elimination. We demand an immediate forensic audit of the allocations for the Men on Mission program, which is coming over as another slush fund for corruption and wastage of taxpayers' money? Is this one of the hiding places for giving more funds to the elite, their families, their friends, and their favorites? The insignificant increases mentioned before must be taken against the backdrop of the high cost of living. Notably absent from this budget are measures to reduce the high cost of living. We argue in putting people first, the budget must seek to reduce poverty. It has little or no measures to do so. Incidentally, putting people first appears only once in the budget, whereas infrastructure is referred to over 30 times. This underscores the government's real priorities, making the rich richer and the poor poorer. Any budget that puts people first would have meaningful measures that benefit and empower people. We hope that the PPPC would continue borrowing or stealing ideas from our manifesto and make adequate provisions, especially in areas such as increased salaries and poverty alleviation. The 1.558 trillion budget is approximately 50.4% or 785 billion invested in infrastructure. However, most of it is for continuation and maintenance of prior projects. We maintain our estimate that no less than $235.5 billion or no less than 30% of the infrastructure budget will be lost to corruption. Interestingly, infrastructure was mentioned more than 30 times while putting people first only once. I repeat that for emphasis. Also, note the projected waste of $235.04 billion is 234 times the 100 billion the PPP has set aside. 2.35 times the 100 billion dollars the PPPC has set aside for its so-called Putting People First program. If corruption and wastage were targeted, the people of Guyana will get far more direct income. Ashni Singh mentioned high cost of living, but did not identify enough people first measures to mitigate it. He mentioned mitigating the cost of fuel, freight charges, and setting aside $9 billion to ease cost of living. There are no details on this program. If the cash transfers are $60 billion, but should have been $120 billion, were it not an election gimmick, then the $9 billion figure is $51 billion short of the promise. The PPPC has effectively robbed Guyanese of $51 billion. Agriculture expansion is one of the key sectors that can alleviate the cost of living in Guyana and bring benefits to citizens. We see $113.2 billion or 7% allocated, but question the construct of its use. Agriculture is a main non-oil sector for targeted development and decentralized job creation. APNU believes that any agricultural development plan must be targeted to combat high cost of living within each region, coupled with job creation. There is need for the promotion of sustainable agriculture in every region, thus guaranteeing food availability and food security. Hinterland regions will continue to experience high cost of living like other areas because of the government's unwillingness to promote sustainable agricultural development in every region. These fit into Minister Ashni Singh's utterances years ago that regions 2, 3, 5, and 6 have a comparative advantage in agriculture, and it should be left to those regions to undertake agricultural production. This is false and outdated thinking, and a mechanism to deprive the other regions of becoming agriculturally sustainable and ensure cheap food is available and there is food security. The APNU acknowledges that the PPPC has little or no ideas of their own. but we would have welcomed them stealing from our proposal of funding agricultural and other initiatives by delivering 50% of the carbon credits funds to residents of indigenous communities. That would have been a clear case of putting people first. While the government is stingy on money for poverty reduction, in 2025, the government budgeted $786 billion for refreshments and meals, but ended up spending $913 million dollars. The PPP elite continues to eat out our resources. Alarmingly, they have budgeted $908 million to eat in 2026 while offering $100 million to improve communities. This budget has a lot of waste spending in it. While the government is talking about digitalizing the system, we see $100 million increase in print and non-print materials. If you are digitalizing, why the need for such a large increase? APNU notes the $5.6 billion increase to $19.8 billion in the local government budget. With the historic underfunding and hindrance by the PPPC opposition, with the historic underfunding and hindrance by the PPPC of opposition-controlled local government administration since 1992, this is an alarming increase. APNU is wary that it is sure to peddle more of the same hindrance by this dictatorial, undemocratic government, and the local organs will not be allowed to manage the resources allocated to them. We call on the government to allow local government organs to govern. This 2026 budget puts contracts first for the governing elite, their families, friends, and favorites, not the poor and vulnerable citizens. It consolidates power, centralizes spending, and continues to be a divisive economic model that benefits a few while leaving the majority exposed to rising cost of living and other social problems. APNU call on Guyanese to scrutinize not the slogans, but the numbers, and to demand a change to a development model that places dignity, income security, and opportunity at the center of national policy. This is what putting people first means to Guyanese. Budget 2026 does not put people first. It is the same old playbook of enriching the elite, their families, friends, and favorites through infrastructural projects while resulting in increased poverty amidst the Guyanese people. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, the floor is open for questions, or by the raise of hand.
Sorry, I didn't hear clearly, Svetlana Marshall from News Source. Are you saying that it's now open for questions?
Yes, Ms. Marsha.
Good day. Mr. Norton, you mentioned that 50.40% of the budget has been allocated to infrastructure development, and you're alleging that a lot of this money would help, in a sense, to fuel corruption. You also spoke about the need for anti-corruption measures. Aside from increasing the salaries, you propose a 25% wage increase. What measures you think ought to be in place to, even as the government rolls out these infrastructure projects, should be in place to cut, to reduce corruption in the country, whether it's in infrastructure sector, or corruption across the board? How should government go about tackling corruption? That's one. What are some of the cost of living measures ought to have been put in place? Aside from increasing salaries, what could be done to really bring down the cost of living, the cost of food? Those two for now.
Okay, on the last one, I can say to you, if you go to my last two budget presentations, I've outlined a number of measures to reduce, so to improve the quality of life of the people. Almost immediately, you can see if more resources were put into cash transfer, that will contribute. If more in terms of resources were given to children, we also recommended in one of our presentations that the government needs to establish a school transportation system that allows children to go to school free of cost. It will immediately remove the cost to parents and it will impact in a positive way. We also said that you can help with the cost of living. I'm talking about direct help by providing the children with 2 square meals, 2 hot meals, which would mean Monday to Friday, children will not have to get money or food or whatever for school. And that will impact in a direct way. We also said that we would have raised the minimum wage much higher so that it would have directly impact people and it would have mean they will have more resources to purchase the things they need to purchase and therefore impact the cost of living. Of course, that had to go with our proposal for sustainable agriculture in the regions so that the foods are produced there, the quantities are increased and therefore contributing to bringing down the price. Now, as it relates to reducing corruption, there are many measures that can be taken to reduce corruption. First, ensure that the procurement commission operates in keeping with the law. Second, reducing the amount of insider information that is given to contractors and develop a more open approach to government procurement, allowing the appeal mechanism of the procurement system to work independently of government so that it will be exposed if they do anything to the contrary. Now, I pointed to what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. If you improve the competence of the government, you will have a situation where they will do comparative analysis and recognize that, look, a lot of things here are overpriced. Of course, we know it is in their corruption scheme to ensure they are overpriced. Now, the other thing is that you have to remove corruption from the top because that filters down. And the president could have outlined clear measures. At minimum, he could have, the finance minister, at minimum, he could have said, any government official found in corruption will be dealt with in keeping with the law. It might not have happened, but at least there would have been a measure there. So there are a whole plethora of measures that can be put in place to deal with corruption. That's the reality. Also, if in budgeting, you do proper budgeting so that you get the exact figures and you don't have to come 3 months from now for more money. The government abuse has to end if there is going to be a fight against corruption.
Just to follow up, Mr. Norton, you mentioned among the measures cash transfer, increased cash transfer, but is it feasible to increase the cash transfer? Is it going to last like in the long term? and what impact such transfers would have on the economy.
One of the things I didn't mention is reallocation of resources. Look, there's a definition in politics of politics called the authoritative allocation of resources, meaning the state has the authority to allocate the resources. And how the state allocates the resources give you an indication of which group the state is working in the interest of. If there is a proper reallocation of resources, we showed you that in comparative terms, we pay far more for a road, a kilometer of road work, than Trinidad pays. That in itself would constitute a saving. And if the minimum figure of 30% is used, you are saving $235 billion, which will make it sustainable. That has to be added to an economic approach in which you are increasing and expanding production so that the economy becomes more productive and it has at its disposal resources to utilize.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Antonio Day.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Norton or anyone who's capable to answer Antonio News question outside the presser. Can the party say what is the position with GCOM's commissioners? Because there seems to be a conundrum because recently, relying on a report by news source, it was reported that the services of the commissioners were reportedly terminated with the aim of the GCOM chair to decommission the current commission. Could you say what is the party's position? Because yesterday I saw that the chairperson said that she now admits that she has no authority to remove these individuals.
If you go back, I thought you were finished.
And secondly, what is your party's position on the collective labor agreement between Aurora Gold Mines and NACI in wake of the circumstances?
All right. Now let me answer the first one last. I didn't look at the collective agreement. I don't know if any on the panel did. So I don't want to venture into an area that I didn't. Now, as it relates to GCOM, when the chairman of the commission spoke the first time, I said at our press conference that she has no authority, that it's a permanent commission, and that unless there's a change in the law, not one of the commissioners could be removed. Look, Guyana arrived at a permanent commission after years of wrangling. I recall the PNC was one at the time pointing out the dangers of a permanent commission while acknowledging the positives. And so you have a change in the dynamics, but the law hasn't changed. And insofar as the law hasn't changed, then there is nothing that the chairman could have done. I thought as an opposition party, what Win would have done was to engage us in consultation so that we could deal with the issue and point out to him and his team that it is the law. I think it doesn't look well if you as an opposition run to GCOM for GCOM to tell you we can't do anything. It shows you are not doing your homework. You might be obsessed with getting rid of those who were appointed before, but you need to do your homework so that you can deal with the issue properly. The reality is it's a permanent commission, and unless there's a change of law, those commissioners will remain there.
And I just want to add to that answer and say that Vincent Alexander was nominated by the PNC. Charles Corbin was nominated by the PNC, and Desmond Trotman was nominated by the APNU AFC. We would recall that Vincent Alexander and Charles Corbin were nominated when the PNC was in opposition, and Desmond Trotman was nominated when we were in government. And their appointment, they cannot be removed by those very parties who nominated them. And that is an important point to note. And I think there is a commissioner or two from the PPP side that were claimed to be from the PPP side that were nominated when the PPP was in opposition. The point I'm making is that when these nominations are made and they're appointed, they serve at the behest of the people of Guyana, really, not necessarily to a political party, because the political party, after making the nomination, no longer have that leverage or that claim to remove. Thank you.
If I could just add as well, that the issue of appointments by the leader of the opposition is not limited to the opposition commissioners. It's also is well known that the chairperson of GCOM is appointed by the president after when he chooses from a list of 6 nominees that are provided to him by the leader of the opposition. And I find it curious that only the issue of the opposition commissioners has come up in the public, since the appointment of the leader of the opposition. Nothing has been heard about the chairperson of GCOM. And I would venture a little further to say that if I had to identify a problem at GCOM, I would first identify the chairperson as the source of most of the problems rather than the opposition commissioners.
In fact, it is instructive that you go after the commissioners who have been fighting for changing the electoral system and leave the chairman who has been voting with the PPP. It is indicative of the fact that you support what is happening, and that is unfortunate.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Norton, or anyone at the table, just to follow up, you're saying that it is indicative that the current leader of the opposition consult with the opposition parties so that we can be able to forge ahead as a resolution? What you're saying?
What I said, were he an astute politician and he was properly advised, rather than run in the public and say, Alexander Dem must go, and then run to GCOM, he would have engaged. Let us have an understanding of the law and let's work out if change is to occur, how it will occur. But as it presently is, you cannot make the change, any change, unless the law changes. And all the chairman said was that she couldn't. But recall that the chairman, without paying attention to the law, again, it's unfortunate, actually claimed to decommission the commission. And then I pointed out in a press conference that if she does that, she's decommissioning herself. And like I said, I find it strange that members of the opposition would target the commissioners, like Dr. Campbell said, without targeting the source of the problem, a chairman who votes every time with the government. It tells you a lot about the direction they're going.
Thank you. The floor is still open for questions.
Mr. Norton, I know you referenced to what is stated in law and in the Constitution with regards to whether the commissioners could be removed like that. But have you been in a discussion, have you spoken to those 3 commissioners to have an understanding of if there's a willingness on any of their part to step down, given the change in the political layout on the opposition side in Parliament?
I saw no need to do that. In fact, if somebody goes out and say they have to move without even engaging them, why would I go down that road? I believe the law is clear. The commissioners are within their right to stay there, and I support them until probably there's a change in law.
Svetlana, and the leader he remembers historical events with much greater clarity and accuracy than I do. But at one point, there was a call for Commissioner Alexander to leave to resign as a commissioner. And at the time, he made a public statement that he was not there to serve any political party. But once he appointed, he represented the opposition in its entirety.
And that is a fact. One of the arguments made at the time of establishing a permanent commission is that they should represent the opposition and not a political party.
Thank you. The floor is still open for about two more questions.
Okay, I'll go again. With respect to Region 10, you see, we heard from the Minister of Local Government, and she said, according to the laws governing the election at the level of the council, there's no role for her. She cannot intervene in the election of the chairman or vice chairman. And we've seen also the lack or refusal of the clerk of council to reconvene a meeting. Could you say what has been done from the level of the Partnership for National Unity to maybe have this issue resolved? We saw that WIN and its supporters they've been protesting, I think, for the past 2 days. What has been done by APNU?
APNU did what it had to do, declare that it is disposed to contest in the election whenever it is called.
I mean, whenever, could be anytime. It could be next year. Are you not concerned that a region?
I wish that I could have said tomorrow, yesterday,
Or later
day
on this
after
afternoon.
tomorrow, but I cannot, and I don't believe in just speculating in the jungle, not even know what you're looking for.
Thank you.
Let me answer this way. The impasse is as a result of a tie between the two parties, APNU and AFC. Sorry, not AFC, WIN. Have the two parties met since to maybe hammer out an agreement as to how they will share maybe the chairman and vice chairman position? Any discussion along that line to ensure that whenever a meeting is called again,
What I can
that there is not a...
What I can say to
Go
you,
ahead.
from the time the situation emerged, personally, in fact, it was the first time I engaged with him. I engaged, and we were told in no uncertain terms that there's going to be a discussion. We will do what we have to do in Lynn, and this is meaning WIN. So after that, it is politics for me.
Thank you. I see that.
All right,
1 second. I recognize the hand of Mr. Mark Benchcock.
Hi, thank you, and good morning, everyone.
1 second. I
Yeah.
recognize the hand of
my question is about the lack of any sort of interest to investigate serious allegations with regards to police recruits being sexually molested, and also the lack of energy on the part of the government on having an independent probe, a proper independent probe in the suicide of that young lady at the Georgetown Public Hospital. My final question is directed to Dr. Campbell, as it pertains to, I know Mr. Aubrey Norton addressed it, but I'd like to hear Dr. Campbell's position on the weakness and the fakeness, so to speak, of this so-called $1.5 trillion budget that offers nothing for the ordinary people, but just hand out a little crumbs, increase of pensions and so forth, and billions of dollars being pumped into Gaisuko. Thank you.
As it relates to the sexual molestation and the independent probe into the suicide at GPHC, I don't think you can expect one. When a government is engaged in the level of corruption it is engaged in, it is very difficult for such a government to investigate any crime. It would open the flood doors for the investigation into what Sue said. It would open the floodgates into the investigation in the death of paper shards. But the government cannot afford that type of investigation because in some regard it is complicit. And so I don't anticipate there is going to be any investigation. I've said before, these things will build up and the time will come when the people of Guyana will act. What we have to do is work to ensure that the people of Guyana act on these things because it's the only way you're going to get any change.
You know, Mark, before
Sure.
Dr. Campbell go to the other question, this particular issue regarding police recruits being allegedly sexually molested, it's a sensitive matter also, and it requires, of course, the persons making the allegations to come forward and provide the necessary information to substantiate the claim. I can tell you that we support an investigation. We support the need for an independent investigation, and we are well aware as to police brutality at the level of the training school. And we also are aware that the powers that be in the police force sometimes try their best to hide down and try to cover for senior officers, which is not what's supposed to happen. And it's a very serious matter. We have been paying attention to what is being released, especially from Big Smith Newswatch, who seems to have close connections and ties to the Guyana Police Force in terms of releasing these information, and we welcome it. And we do support the need for the investigation, but the support that the complainants, the support that the young ladies will need is something that also has to be looked at, and we cannot rule out that they may very well be under pressure too. It will call for real strength from them to maintain their stance, maintain their position, and get the protection from the state. I trust the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security will also play a role in providing the kind of counseling, guidance, and intervention that is necessary to address what seems to be a scourge right now at the Guyana Police Force.
Also with the divisions at the top of the Guyana Police Force, it's going to be very difficult for the police. That's why it has to be an independent investigation. Because from the information I'm having, you have a commissioner who's supposed to be running the police force, but other people running it, taking instructions from others. And so you don't have a proper centralized command that can deal with those issues. What happens if the persons that are accused are in good stead with the political elite? Then right away, nobody budging. And mind you, when you have a situation like you have in the Guyana Police Force, where people are being sanctioned, visa being revoked, etc., you know you have a leadership that has difficulties and will not be able to stand together to deal with such infractions.
Thank you for the question, Mark. And let me just add a little bit to what the leader and Honorable Ganesh Mahipal have said. I think that and I'll be very clear, I believe the allegations were against the head of SOCU. And this is not a gentleman against whom allegations, new to allegations of improper conduct. I myself suffered surveillance at the hands of SOCU in or around February last year. Mr. Karen Bash is such a powerful person in the police force. I think that with the allegations against him, he should step aside to facilitate an independent investigation. And if he doesn't voluntarily step aside, he should be asked to step aside. Decency, civility, and good governance in this country requires this. In addition, to the call for an independent investigation, I think it should be led by competent investigators who are brought in from some acceptable external agency. Moving to your question about the budget. My sense is that with the budget, normally you start with a goal. What is the goal that you want to achieve? The goal at the start of this budget was infrastructure. My sense is that the minister and the president and the vice president sat in a room and they listed first all of the infrastructure projects. They listed the projects that were likely go to, and very important in those projects, the projects that were going to go to friends, family, and favorites, dredging the Berbice and the Demerara bridges. Having set out the infrastructure budget, and that took up 50% of, well, at that point, they would not have known exactly. They would have known what percentage of the revenues it would take up, coming from oil and LCDS and tax revenues. But then they found themselves in a conundrum, and this has led to the biggest budget deficit ever at $450 billion. In that budget, as you pointed out, there is another $13 billion for GAISUCO. And let me say again that the APNU had a plan to strengthen and diversify GAISUCO into agro-processing, into housing, and so on, so as to reduce the drain on the treasury. What we have seen within recent times, and I will speak about this because sometimes these things happen and the Guyanese people really don't understand what is happening. I'm yet to receive an explanation as to why the GAISUCO should have they're talking about value added in so many different sectors. They're talking about value added in gold jewelry. They're talking about value added in furniture. Why not value added in sugar for GAISUCO? No, instead the deal is being done by a friend of the administration. So this government has no intention of putting the people first. It was infrastructure and then just marginal incremental increases in terms of income and in terms of poverty alleviation. Additionally, there is one other, we haven't brought it up in this press conference so far, but there is one other significant imbalance, and that is the regional imbalance, and I will keep pushing this. In Region 6, if I remember well, there is going to be a new regional airport. There is an ophthalmology institute. There is an oil and gas institute. There is an hospitality institute. There is a new gas pipeline that's coming to Region 6. There is a stadium, Palmyra, at Palmyra. There's a Palmyra Cultural Institute that's coming. There's a Deepwater Harbor. What we are seeing is a diversion of resources towards Region 6. And regions like Regions 4 and 10 that are perhaps not considered favorable to this administration are being left behind and starved of resources. And we must call out the government for this imbalance.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Antonio there.
Yeah, good morning again. Mr. Campbell or Mr. Maipaul, because Mr. Norton said he would not be able to answer the question. My question still stands with the labor agreement between Aurora Gold Mines and Nasir. Sorry, Mr. Solomon is not here because he is vocal on this matter. Would any of the two individuals be able to speak on the subject?
I think it is, if I'm not mistaken, I did see something in the press about 8% and 9% or something along that line. But I prefer for us to
Study.
give that, study that some more and perhaps gather some more information, and then it will put us in a better light to present a more informed answer.
Antonio, I would
Not
say,
even,
Antonio, I would say this to you. I've said that I haven't looked at it in detail, and I want it to be clear. I'm not prepared to just comment for the sake of commenting. Whenever at the policy level you're commenting, you should have already analyzed all aspects of it and be able to put firm, clear positions. And we will do that in future. But I don't want
understood, Mr. Norton, and I understand. That's why I defer the question to the other parties. All right, Mr. Paul, my last question. Can you guide us on the practicality of APNU formulating its own shadow cabinet, given that WIN is the main opposition party? Because I know that budget presentations are set for Monday, and I know that yourself and other members of the APNU have the portfolios. So I just wanted guidance as to how that is going to play out.
Let me say this. The construct of a shadow minister is a convention. It has no basis in the Constitution. It doesn't have any in the standing orders, etc. While we are disposed to negotiating and talking, we have to represent the people who would have elected us. They didn't elect us to talk just to one issue or two issues. They elect us to talk to all the issues that are affecting them. And we took a decision that we will identify shadows to do that. Now, the major reason is representation. That doesn't prevent any other speaker or any other member of parliament on the other side from doing the same and representing. We have 12 people that will speak in parliament. They have to speak to the budget. And the budget covers all sectors, and we're compelled to address all sectors.
So I'm happy that the leader provided that guiding principle so that we can understand what has happened there. There are 12 members of parliament for the APNU, and APNU will be speaking on the entire budget, which captures all 20 ministries. I want to go a little further and say to you that I understand, on our side, we understand that when it comes to the budget debates, there are going to be 27 members from the PPP side who are likely to speak for 30 minutes with an extension of 5 minutes should they require it. And the normal practice in the parliament has been for the opposition side to get the equivalent in terms of the ministries that are available. So right now, the government has 20 ministries. So it is expected for 20 opposition MPs to be afforded that same 30 minutes plus 5 minutes for their presentations, while the others will have 15 minutes plus 5 should they need it. The APNU reached out to WIN in good faith, and that was because we do want to see a smooth flow of the budget presentations, and we also want to not deprive members of the opportunity to utilize the maximum available time so that they can be able to speak on the budget with great clarity. Unfortunately, the discussion between WIN and APNU is at an impasse because WIN wants to take 13 of the 20 allotted 30 plus 5 time, or else we may want to term it as shadows, and they want to give Amanza 1 also, which makes it 14, and they want to give APNU 5, and the leader of the opposition getting the 1 hour period also. We have advanced from the APNU side an argument that speaks to proportionality. We believe that we are in the National Assembly on proportionality. Proportionality has given the People's Progressive Party 36 seats. It has given WIN 16 seats. It has given APNU 12 seats and FGM 1 seat. Proportionality, therefore, and I should go forward and say proportionality is also the basis on which we will be sitting on the various committees of the National Assembly. And proportionality gives, in a 10-member committee, as we know, the PPP 6 members, the APNU 2 members, and the WIN party 2 members in a 10-member committee. In a 9-member committee, the PPP will get 5, the APNU will get 2, and the WIN will get 2. So proportionality decided on all of that. And we on the APNU side believe that proportionality should also decide on the speaking time for the members. Proportionality, therefore, will dictate that WIN gets 11 members from their 16 to speak for 30 minutes plus 5. It will give them 4 members to speak for 15 minutes plus 5, and the leader of the opposition gets an hour to speak. Proportionality will also dictate that the APNU gets 8 members to speak for 30 minutes plus 5, and 4 members to speak 15 minutes plus 5. And proportionality will also give the 1 member from FGM 30 minutes plus 5. Because according to proportionality, FGM gets 1, APNU gets 8, and WIN gets 11. That's going to give you the 20 ministries to cover in budget presentation to 30 plus 5. Unfortunately, WIN has signaled their non-cooperation towards that, and we are at an impasse. I am guided, having communicated with the Chief Whip of the People's Progressive Party, Gail Teixeira, that no list has been submitted to her as yet from the opposition with reference to the order of speaking nor the time allocated for speaking. I have, however, indicated to her that our list of speakers will be submitted to her by the end of today should nothing come out from WIN reference to this negotiation. But we cannot want to have a unified opposition and cooperation through bullyism. Proportionality is what has us in Parliament, and that is what we should operate on as the principle for us to be equally represented or equitably represented in the National Assembly. I trust that answers your question in detail.
Yanis, if I could just add one thing there, that the initial proposal contained an error of either 19 ministries or a misunderstanding of the role of the leader of the opposition, that he did not count as a shadow minister. When we were given 5, WIN 13, and Amanza 1 for 19, the assumption apparently on WIN's side was that the leader of the opposition was counting in that shadow ministry.
I have one final question coming from Mr. Mark Benchcock, who is off of the network at the moment, but I will read the question. Why is the PPP government neglecting to do the Linden to Kokwani Road is the question.
The PPP has never shown an interest in Region 10, except if they think they can get support based on what they would have done. And if you know, before we came to government in 2015, that road was impassable. We had improved it and bring it to the point where you could have driven and get to Kokwani in no time. They have allowed it to deteriorate, and they seem to show no interest Why they're doing that is a question for the PPP. I can only speculate that it is part of the approach to the APNU areas.
Thank you. At this time, I want to.
Mr. Ennis, if I may, I just wanted a query from Mr. Mike Paul. So Mr. Mike Paul, given that there seems to be an impasse, you are not sure if there is going to be a compromise the amount of time that is allotted.
I don't know what you mean by compromise. What I know is that there's a practice in the National Assembly, and it's a matter of the opposition side sorting themselves out. We have extended and we have been showing great strides in wanting to ensure that we make the effort of getting it right, but simultaneously we don't expect to be bullied. I mean, between Win and us, they're 16 and we're 12. This is the first time we are both actually strong in the National Assembly. Yes, they have 16 seats, but we equally have 12, and that is not a small number either. All I'm asking for is for Win to recognize that we are in the National Assembly on proportionality, and let's get this work done and done properly so that we can hold the government accountable. I mean, the problem doesn't exist with the PPP here. It exists with Win. And we have what I will say a plausible solution in the sense of proportionality. And it's most unfortunate that Win doesn't seem to want to respect proportionality, but want to be dominant, controlling, and want to bully us. And we will not have that.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to thank our media personnel for joining today's press conference, and of course, you, our viewing audience, and all the social media platforms. And I do hope that you have a wonderful weekend as we come to the end of January. And we look forward to see you in the month of February. Do have a wonderful afternoon.